reason. Oops, I'll start over. So our topic for tonight is hatred. It's a heavy topic, and I wanted to tell you why I chose it. I'm saddened to see how polarized our country and our world have become. This isn't the first time in history that hatred has gained power. For example, much of what is happening now is reflected in the history surrounding World War II. I have hope that we will cycle out of this phase and back into a more loving one. As Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I firmly believe that. Like all hate, the hatred expressed virulently during the prelude to World War II was based on earlier trauma. So trauma is going to be a big theme in talking about hate. The Treaty of Versailles after World War I treated Germany terribly. It punished the people financially and made life there unbearable. It was very easy for them to look for a group to scapegoat, to hate. And of course, we are all susceptible to hate. I've been a projector of hate onto others and a recipient of it. What is hatred? Well, loosely, you could say it's having a negative attitude towards another person or group in which you hold them as an enemy, even as inhuman. It can be used to justify discriminating against them, abusing them, or even murdering them. Hatred also spans the spectrum from overt toxic behavior to unconscious bias. So we're all capable of hate, and we've probably all hated in our lives. And there's a lot of unconscious material that in our practice we can start to understand or come in contact with that will help us understand uh, our biases and our hates, and to have more control and understanding of them. So I wanted to tell you a story about hating my dad and ultimately forgiving him. I grew up in a lower middle class Jewish ghetto in Philadelphia during the 1950s. This was a time of paranoia in the US about communism, the McCarthy era, and hostility between people in my neighborhood was rampant. It was just part of the culture. You had to be a hard ass. Boys were trained to be macho, but I was too unsure of myself to fit in. However, because I was a brainy kid in school, my tough guy friends protected me and felt a certain pride in me being one of them. I lacked confidence because my dad regularly physically and emotionally abused my sister and me. When he had his rage and hatred attacks, I thought I would die, so I stayed as far away as I could. Sadly, my sister, on the other hand, fought him, bringing on more abuse. I hated him from nearly as early as I can remember. I wanted him to die. And as I got older, my relationship with him changed, but very slowly. Over a period of maybe 40 years, he grew frailer, while I began to see how damaged he was and to feel some compassion for him. He had been severely abused by his father, and who knows what had happened to his father, probably worse. He was a high school dropout. His life had been an out of control mess to which he reacted the only way he knew, with rage and hate. From a Buddhist perspective, hate is one of the three poisons. And so they're a very it is one of, it is a very fundamental part of Buddhism when we think about things that way. The three poisons are greed, hatred, and delusion. And interestingly, in the wheel of life, hatred is symbolized by a snake, greed is symbolized by a rooster, and delusion is symbolized by a pig. I get the snake. The rooster and the pig, at least from a US perspective, I don't quite get. But in the middle of many Buddhist renderings, you'll see these three animals together. They are the driving forces behind suffering. And of course, they are some of the main building blocks of samsara. Why does hatred exist? Well, as a biologist, I think hate is part of our neuro heritage, and that for this behavior to persist over eons of evolution, it must have had some survival value. So perhaps aversion towards other groups has allowed for survival of the fittest humans, especially when resources were thin and groups competed to stay alive. To see an example of this in the animal world, you might want to watch Chimp Empire. Uh, whoa, chimps are not nice guys. They compete with each other for dominance, and then they have wars with other groups of chimps. I never knew that until I watched Chimp Empire. However, at present, we have enough resources on Earth, as long as we treat our planet with respect, share them fairly with others, and treat others respectfully. Much of our present day strife is caused by unequal sharing and lack of respect. As Martin Luther King said, we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or perish together as fools. What causes hate? I think hatred grows from trauma, as I mentioned before. When we are hurt deeply, physically and or emotionally, our brains are conditioned, perhaps they're even hardwired, to look for a cause and a scapegoat. Such traumas give rise to feelings of rage, anger, and revenge, which propel hatred. And through our practice, we can learn to understand these and not let them run the show. The neurobiology of hate. There's a neurobiologist named Seymour Zeki in London who led a study that conducted MRI scans of the brains of 17 adults as they gazed at images of people they professed to hate. Across the board, areas of unconsciousness located in several different parts of the brain were activated. These parts are the so-called hate circuit. So there's actually a circuit that's known in the brain that contributes to hate. Uh, and these circuits can also initiate aggressive behavior. But actually, the feelings of aggression itself, as well as anger, danger, and fear, they show a different part of the brain. They show up in a different place than hate does. Interestingly, the same circuit that's used in hate shares a lot of the same territory as love. Uh,
I wondered if he was going to say that.
the areas, these areas are activated by individual hate uh, and are some of the same as those for romantic love. Uh, this linkage may account for why love and hate seem to be so closely linked to each other in life. In order to love, you may need to hate, although hate non-violently. And in order to hate, maybe you need to somehow have access to love. One little fun fact, interestingly, love also seems to deactivate areas traditionally associated with judgment, whereas hatred activates areas that may be involved in evaluating another person or predicting their behavior. I thought it was really interesting that love deactivates judgment, and that certainly has rung true in my life at times where falling in love, all reason goes out the window. Uh, how is hate learned? Although trauma seems to be a necessary precursor to hate, I think it also is learned by seeing examples and by misinformation. It's easier to hate when you don't really know anyone in the hated group. Also, it seems easier to indoctrinate kids into hatred because they are so innocent and impressionable. So I think one place to look is in the schools, not only in our country, but in other countries, uh, to be cautious about any hateful messages that are being transmitted. How can we unlearn hate? Because it really is tenacious. There's a movie and a book, Best of Enemies, which tells the story of C.P. Ellis and Ann Atwater. C.P. Ellis was born in 1927 in Durham, North Carolina, as the son of a mill worker. He was deeply influenced by his father, who drank regularly and was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Ellis had an impoverished childhood and wore worn-out clothes to school. He often felt embarrassed about how he and his father looked in public. Ellis was active in the Klan as well because it was the only place where he felt respected. Many years later, some 40 years later, the Durham schools faced considerable turmoil because of court-ordered desegregation. The state AFL-CIO, that's a union, received a large grant from the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare to address the school's racial policies, which were way out of whack. A community organizer, motivated by fears of violence among the students, organized a series of community meetings where the entire community came together to try to solve this problem. Wisely, his first step was to create a steering committee that was representative of the community. The organizer invited Ann Atwater, an African-American civil rights activist, and Ellis, a segregationist, to co-chair the meetings. Whoa, amazing that he had the brilliance or foolishness to invite these two very far apart people. But after 10 days of talks and headbutting, Ellis and Atwater began to become friends, and Ellis came to believe that whites, especially poor whites, could prosper more from the civil rights movement than from segregation. Atwater and Ellis came to know each other as individuals instead of as stereotypes. And I think this points out a really important idea, which is as you get to know people from a group that you maybe didn't previously know, it humanizes them, and you see the same kinds of struggles in them as you have in your own life. So Ellis and Ann Atwater came to see how they, as poor people, were both oppressed, and that their children faced many of the same issues. It was during this time that they actually cried together. Now, I'd like to tell you another story from my life, which is how I joined my high school track team. Racism was virulent in my neighborhood. Racial misinformation was in the air that we breathed. It was awful. My high school was 70% Black, 29% Jewish, 1% other. Bizarre demographics. When I joined the track team, I was one of two white kids, and I expected to be harassed by my teammates. What blew my mind was that I was welcome. Amazing. Thinking about the graciousness of my teammates still brings tears to my eyes. And I want to show you a little show and tell here. My high school track record letter. We won the city championship that year. That's why the O is split. It was Overbrook High School, where Will Chamberlain went many years before me. So how do we talk to a person engaged in hate? Well, one possibility is to respectfully confront them if it's safe for you. This could also be a long-term project if you feel like investing in trying to change their minds and attitudes. Long-term, somehow earn their trust without trampling on your own values, or if they're toxic, get away from them. So how about you? How do you approach a situation like this? And I just want to end with a few quotes and a question to ponder. So the Buddha said, hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is a law eternal. And Martin Luther King said something similar. I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. And love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. And darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. So I would like you to ponder, how has hate affected your life? How much hate came your way? How much hate did you put onto others? Have you worked on your unconscious biases? And I'll end with a quote again from Martin Luther King. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right, temporarily defeated, is stronger than evil is triumphant.